It's time for Husker Chat. I'm Jayson. Jorgensen is brought to you by Acres Equipment. We're joined by Sean Callahan of Husker Online as Nebraska is coming off that impressive loss, if you will, moral victory in Columbus. Sean told us last week not to fear that the Huskers would show up and make it a game, and they certainly did. You saw a great football game on Saturday.
Yeah, this team, the Indiana game was so hard to understand because I didn't think this team really was going to have moments like that this year because their defense. And we saw right away, especially with a healthier Jamari Butler and MJ Sherman together on the edge, that gave this defense even a different look. When you had MJ Sherman, Butler on the edge, Ty Robinson, Nash Hutmacher, all playing at that level up front. I mean, they were better than Ohio State. I mean, they controlled the line of scrimmage to the point where the only third down that Ohio State converted the entire game was a QB sneak where there was actually a false start made by the left tackle that wasn't called. So they dominated up front. And when you play like that, I mean, go back to 2009 Nebraska, you're going to play with a lot of good teams. Unfortunately, Nebraska just wasn't able to kind of find their groove on offense against a very good Buckeye defense.
Missed opportunities, it seemed to me that the Huskers made some breaks and did a great job of bouncing back. But if you get a chance like that in a big game on the road against somebody good, I always say you always got to make it hurt. And Nebraska didn't always do that.
Yeah, and you got to get touchdowns. You got to score when you get those opportunities. I mean, like Malcolm Hartsock, if he could have scored a touchdown, that might have been a big difference. And the momentum at that point to take the lead on that play and then kick it off to Ohio State down. And granted, they got the ball back and scored on the next possession, but there were just a lot of moments. And, the officiating, as we know, there were some inconsistencies in the game, and those moments mattered in the end. But Ohio State still has very good players on defense, and they made it hard. I mean, Nebraska just was not able to find a play when it really mattered down the stretch.
What do you make of when the league comes back and says, "Oh, we missed one, we're sorry"? To me, it'd almost be better off just to not say anything. I mean, it doesn't change the outcome of the game.
I think the evidence, though, was so damning with the videos that kind of came out after the game of that mistake, particularly, that if they didn't say something and recognize the wrong that was made by their paid professionals to call the game, I think they would take a hit in their credibility. So I do think for the Big Ten, it made some sense to say this. And there's just enough evidence out there now that it was a clear miss on the spotting of the football. It's hard to go back on holding calls and pass interference situations because those are subjective opinion calls, but spotting the football is not.
Yeah.
And when you misspot a ball by that much, a couple of times really, but one that really, they identified, that is a big deal.
I went back and watched the game after the fact. Were you surprised maybe Nebraska didn't challenge that spot at the time?
Under 2 minutes and a half, that is my understanding. When it's under 2 after the 2-minute warning, the booth is who can challenge at that point. So that had to have been a booth challenge, I believe. Now, Matt Rule could have used his timeout, and then, that could have maybe helped get the challenge. So there's a lot of things that you could have done there, but it's my understanding your challenges under 2 minutes aren't allowed to be used.
Today on Husker Chat, we're talking with Sean Callahan. It's brought to you by Acres Equipment. So Nebraska with that tight loss at Ohio State. Sean, now they turn around and play UCLA. Not that they have been great, but when I've seen them play a little bit this year, they're not bad, and they have found a way to hang around with some people.
Yeah, they're a deceiving 2-5 team when you look at them on paper. They beat Hawaii and they've beaten Rutgers. But they easily could have won a lot of other games on their schedule. They had Minnesota beat, and Minnesota's playing good football right now. Minnesota had a score late to beat them in the last minute of the game. So this is a team that, like every Big Ten team, has a lot of depth and players that can make plays. And, they retained most of the roster from last year. That was one of the reasons why Deshaun Foster was hired as the coach after Chip Kelly left to go to Ohio State. By keeping Foster as the coach, it did keep a lot of that roster from a year ago in place there in Pasadena.
What's a storyline you're really keeping an eye on in Saturday's game?
Oh, just if it can carry over for Nebraska, like can they actually play to that level no matter who the opponent is. You don't want it to be they rose up because it was Ohio State. Where Indiana why could they not meet that level of play against the Hoosiers? Or the Hoosiers just that good? So I want to see how Nebraska comes out. I would like to see the defense though get some early stops in this game, kind of set the tone, and then go from there.
I think a lot of people are enthused by this. If that Nebraska team that we saw on Saturday shows up the rest of the year, this could be a nice finish.
Yeah, you've got a year ago they were 5-3 at the same point, and they were underdogs in 2 games and favorites in 2, but the spreads were Iowa by Nebraska favored by 1, and then they were favored by 3 at Michigan State. They were underdogs to Maryland. They were underdogs to Wisconsin, slight underdogs. I look at this last month, it's going to be almost identical as a year ago. They're a touchdown favorite going into this game with a great chance at home. Iowa is going to be a real tight margin, as we know. USC probably is going to be a tighter margin. I could see Nebraska, though, still being an underdog on the road. And then Wisconsin, that's probably going to be the slimmest of point spreads, too. So it's really wild when you think about the Final Four, because Nebraska could win them all. They could easily lose them all. But you'd like to see at least 2 or 3 wins out of this team down the stretch. And I think it would really erase that Indiana game particularly.
Sure would. Sean, as always, we appreciate the time. Have a great week.
Hey, thanks, Jayson.
That was Sean Callahan of Husker Online joining us for Husker Chat. We are here every week, and it's brought to you by Acres Equipment. I'm Jayson Jorgensen.